Welcome to the second video in a three-part series. In this video, I will be demonstrating proper benthic barrier installation techniques.
This video is to demonstrate how to install the barrier. You've already watched video number 1 and you understand the science behind how this technique works. So I'm going to demonstrate first putting out the pin flags, measuring the area to be treated. Recall that the pin flags need to go 20 centimeters past your last stem. So we look for our stems and we come out 20 centimeters. We always have to be thinking in squares because the sheet, the fabric comes in 5-foot rolls. So we're looking at 9 feet this way, and let's do the width. We're going to go about 20 centimeters past, so kind of where your feet are. 9 feet and about 7 feet wide. Now keep in mind that the material comes in 5-foot widths, and we need extra, about 10% extra for the overlap of the fabric. For any bumpy, lumpy, like we've measured flat, but the ground is not flat. Okay, so while our team is off cutting the strips for this section, we are going to cut the plant material down to the ground and prepare it for the matting when the matting arrives. To do that, we use these long-handled shears. If you have a large area to treat, and you have a brush saw, you could come in advance of your crew, brush saw it all down, and then the crew comes in and puts the barrier on top. Don't operate a brush saw with a crew, that's dangerous. And also don't brush saw it and then come back 2 weeks later to treat, because yellow flag iris in the spring can regrow by almost 1 inch a day. So you need to plan to brush saw it and treat it within a couple days. Okay, when we're cutting the plant material to the ground, we want to cut low enough that we expose that purple color of the stem. You don't want to cut so low that you are dislodging rhizome fragments and doing a lot of extra work that you don't need to do. You should see this purple that looks like purple onion, and then you know that you've cut low enough. You see that there's the pin flags there, and so even though it looks all cleaned up and it might seem like those pin flags are overkill, you have to trust that the pin flags are marking the treatment area, and don't start to skimp on your fabric. Okay, so now we're going to demonstrate laying out the fabric, securing the fabric, making sure you've got the overlap in the fabric so that the fabric can't move, it can't wiggle, and you won't get a leaf popping up next spring, which we refer to as a snorkel. When you come up to cut off your sections of fabric that you need, they've been measured, the treatment areas have been measured down at the treatment site. This roll of fabric is about 1,500 square feet. It weighs close to 300 pounds. So you don't want to bring this down there. You want to leave the roll up in a flat, sort of neutral location, and you come up and you cut off the pieces that you need. So you can see it's really thin, and you can easily cut it with an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. All you need to do is roll out the length you want, measure it, and just cut it with the X-Acto knife, fold it up, and haul it down. Okay, so let's lay out this fabric. I'll get you, Phil, to... Yep. This fabric, this is the 18-ounce PVC coated vinyl. I get it from Midland Industrial Covers in Burnaby, BC. It's probably available anywhere where coverings are sold. It's very thin and durable. It's good for at least 10 years. It is fish friendly, so it's called 3P free. There's no polyphenol chemicals in it. And there is no upside or downside. So it does have a textured side, but that's because its main use actually is gymnastics mats. I know that my end has to come to here. Because the iris mat goes underneath this gangway, we have to make sure that this goes underneath the gangway. Yep. And that means that we did have to cut a slit in it. The more times you cut your fabric, you lose versatility in the fabric, but you also need to make the fabric work for you. But we won't cut this piece off here. We'll just leave it loose, or we can tuck it underneath. So once we have this all lined up where we need it to be, don't worry about the lump of material underneath the fabric. It will decompose. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is take our spikes and rocks and secure this mat so that it can withstand the rising lake levels, wave action, and just general durability. When we're securing the mat, we want to use all the resources that we have at our disposal. At this site, we have a lot of rocks. And those rocks, when you pile them on, they're heavy. They also help to camouflage the matting. In many locations, you don't have rocks. And so you need to think about, how am I going to secure this matting with no rocks? And I use these galvanized spikes, 12-inch galvanized spikes with a fender washer. The reason I put the washer on is because these become really hard to get out later. And when you pull on the fabric, you'll rip the fabric with the head of this spike. Yeah, yeah. So the fender washer helps protect the fabric and make it easier to pull it out later. So we have the fabric in place. Now we need to secure it. In the bottom, we'll use rocks. In the top, we can use the spike. Don't go too close to the edge of the fabric or you'll tear it when you want to pull it out. Go in about 2 or 3 inches from the edge. That edge is secure. This edge needs to be secured too, and then we can start to pile rocks on. I use a mini sledgehammer. I think it's 3 pounds. A general utility hammer is not heavy enough to knock the spike through the fabric. We'll pile the rocks on now to secure the mat in place. And we can get the second mat. So if you have a tree like this that is completely surrounded by yellow flag iris and you can't remove it, and you don't want to dig the iris out from it, what you can do is take your X-Acto knife, you cut a slit in the fabric and you wrap it around like a collar, like this, around any trees or shrubs that you want to preserve. And then that way you don't have to cut this down, and when you pull the fabric off, the iris will all be killed around this. When you're stitching the fabric together, you want to put the spikes in about every 70 centimeters. If you have tons of fabric and you end up with a massive overlay, then you can do every meter. If you have not much fabric and the overlap is getting kind of skimpy, then you want to do maybe every 50 centimeters. Yeah, and every time before you put the nail in, check for the overlap and make sure you got the good overlap. You'll see right now, you're trying to pound the nail in, but it's bouncing on all the cut material. And then finally it gets through. The cut material will decompose. But sometimes you're trying to hammer spikes in and the ground is so soft that you're actually pounding the spikes into nothing. In which case, the spikes are serving their function to stitch the fabric together, but they're not securing the fabric at all. And that's when you need to bring in weight. You need to plan ahead, bring cinder blocks, bring sandbags, bring rocks, and plan ahead so that you have that weight that will keep the fabric in place. What happens is you don't have these small patches like this. You actually have one long linear patch. And because of time or money or just fatigue, you may only be able to treat a portion each time. So one year you'll treat 50 feet, the next year you'll treat another 50 feet. You have to sever the connection between the treated rhizomes to the untreated rhizomes. That's absolutely mandatory. If you don't sever that connection, then those rhizomes under the mat are off-gassing out through the other rhizomes. So to do that, you take a shovel like this, has a flat square blade, and it has no curve to it. And you literally stomp the rhizomes and sever them. It doesn't take a lot of work, but you have to be diligent that you cut all of them. And what you do is you go along. If you've got fabric here, you would flip the fabric up. You take your shovel, you stomp, make a bit of an opening, just keep going, making sure that you slice through all the rhizome. Then you would take the fabric and just tuck it into that trench. And then you know that the fabric is secure. If you can't tuck the fabric into that trench, you haven't gone through the rhizomes. So this is a little checks and balances. It also just cleans up the edge and gives the matting a little more stability. And you would do that the whole length. Any edge of the mat where you have untreated rhizomes, whether they're behind you or in front of you, you have to do this. And just take the time, because this is another time-consuming part of the process. There's a few things that you have to make sure that you do on a site like this. You have to go 20 centimeters past the last stem. You have to ensure there are no gaps, especially in your overlapping fabric. You have to ensure that you have enough weight on top of the fabric that it won't shift or move when the water comes in. And you also have to make sure that there's no opportunity for the fabric to sneak out. So have the overlap and place your nails and your spikes close enough to each other that the fabric can't gap open.
Visit the third and final video for instructions on when to remove the barrier, how to identify complete rhizome mortality, and the consequences of incorrect barrier installation.